Alright guys, welcome back. Hope you're doing well, hope you're all keeping safe. I spoke about this briefly in my last video, but today I wanted to really focus on how NPC balancing and difficulty might be affected by this new expertise system, a system which appears to give a minimum at full power of about 10% extra damage to weapons, 10% extra armor, and 10% extra skill damage, haste, etc. This increase in power is an estimate based on the intelligence annex, but subject to change following feedback on the PTS. It's quite possible it might be less than that, but I find that highly unlikely, and in fact I think it might be quite a lot more. As a result of the new expertise system giving players more power, it's only logical then that NPCs will need to be rebalanced. So what are Massive going to do? Drop a like and subscribe to stay up to date with all my videos, and let's talk about some possible options and their impact. Now, I'm sure a lot of you won't be happy that NPCs will need to be rebalanced again. Aside from Legendary being maybe a bit too easy for the more hardcore player, I think the overall NPC difficulties are fine in the game, but it took a very long time to get there. Now, I'm not saying more can't be done to further improve the NPC difficulties, but I rarely see anyone complaining about this anymore. That was something that was at the top of many people's kind of feedback posts for about the first year and a half of the game's life cycle. Now, with that said, if players want some kind of progression with their agents without some kind of level increase, then it's only logical that NPCs need to be rebalanced to accommodate for that increase in player progression or power. So firstly, and personally, I think this is the best solution, but the least likely, and that's a new difficulty above Legendary. If you take me as an example, right now I can play heroic content with relative ease as a solo player. Now, I only play solo. I rarely play in groups, so this is purely coming from a solo player's experience. Now, that could be open world activities or it could be missions. I don't really have a problem most of the time on heroic difficulty content, and I do pretty much everything on that difficulty. In fact, I do everything on that difficulty. I never go below that, and as I'm about to discuss, I never go above that. Legendary difficulty feels to me like a huge step up, and I rarely attempt any legendary content because it's just too challenging for me. It's actually beyond the challenge I'm willing to accept for the rewards that I would gain for doing so. And I bet there are many players in my position as well, whether that be heroic to legendary or another difficulty change. With the new expertise system in place and the possibility of 10% extra power or more, likely more, that jump in difficulty would be a lot easier. And I suspect my new difficulty would become legendary, as heroic would become too easy and legendary would become a challenge without being too difficult. That extra 10% or maybe more really is a big difference when it comes to changing levels. For my friends who play legendary and find it too easy, firstly, you're crazy and just way too good at this game, but secondly, having an extra 10% power or more would make that difficulty almost redundant. So the only way to appease the real hardcore players then would be to have a new difficulty level above legendary. I don't know what you'd call it, mystic, I don't really care. I guarantee you, ask any hardcore player who runs through legendary with ease if a new difficulty above legendary would be a good idea, and I guarantee they would be more than happy. I think a few rewards tied to that difficulty, the same way legendary has rewards, would be very welcome as well, maybe even necessary, but I just think the introduction of a new difficulty would be enough at this stage. To me, this seems like the only real logical way of dealing with NPC difficulty without having to really go in and rebalance everything. Of course, if the power increase is 10% base weapon damage, 10% base armor, and 10% skill damage, haste, etc., that represents a much bigger power increase than just 10%. So it is quite possible that NPCs will likely have to be adjusted in some way, but I think that this particular way of dealing with NPC difficulty and rebalancing is the best option and the least likely. Another option, of course, is an NPC buff, which is basically the same as a player nerf. This, I think, will be what Massive do, mainly because it requires the least amount of resources to achieve, creating a whole new difficulty with quite possibly new NPC skins, the same way that white tusks are white on Legendary, will likely require a lot more work than just maybe going in and rebalancing it so that either NPCs are stronger or players are just weaker. So what would that look like? Well, I think if they choose this option, there really is only one way they would do it. Massive would rebalance NPCs so when you have a fully graded, fully expertised build, NPCs are as strong as they currently are in the live game. Heroic, legendary, whatever the difficulty will be, it will be the same as right now. This, I hope, is not what Massive do, because this does not represent progression of your character. If we have to grind for weeks, even months, I mean, we don't even know how many resources we're going to need in order to invest in maybe expertises we don't want to do or in stuff we don't want to do. It could be that we get the optimization initially, the resources on that, which was really quite bad. It could be that the resources are minimal. We don't really know what the grind is going to look like, but it's going to be weeks, if not months, to reach the same kind of power as we have right now. Then what's the point of the new expertise system? This system is meant to see agents getting more power. It's meant to see us progressing as an agent. It's meant to encourage players to try out new builds. But NPCs are balanced in a way that players are the same as right now. If they do that, I don't think that's going to go down well. What would be the point in the expertise system if they did that? And this is why I think the first solution is most certainly the best option. Not only will it encourage players who are perhaps stuck on one difficulty to consider jumping up to the next one because we're getting the increase in power, it also gives the hardcore players a new difficulty to sink their teeth into. It's quite possible that I've not considered alternative ways for Massive to address NPC difficulty, and if you guys have any suggestions, leave it in the comments down below. How Massive approach this will be paramount to the success of this new system. I can't imagine many players wanting to grind for weeks, progressing their character, if they are not going to see any benefit in their power because of NPC balancing changes. What would be the point in having an expertise system if you don't feel the benefit of that power? And that's why my first solution is the best one by a mile, because every single player, regardless of where you're at currently in the game, will feel that extra power. If I'm going from heroic to legendary, then to me that's progression, and my power will reflect that. If you're going from legendary to a new difficulty, that's even... I can't even imagine a difficulty worse than legendary, guys. I really can't. But there are some people out there who are so good at this game, who have mastered their builds and their crafts and their playstyle, that they really do find legendary easy. If those guys have got a new difficulty and a new challenge, then the extra power that they get from the expertise system will feel like they are progressing as a character or as a player. This is the system that I hope they implement. I don't think they will. I think they will implement the second one, where either players are nerfed or NPCs are buffed. Either way you look at it, the players are nerfed. It doesn't really matter which way you look at it. It's the easiest thing they can do, but I do think it's not going to go down well, guys. I really don't. But unfortunately, I'm sure that that's what they're going to do. I mean, we've heard nothing about new NPCs or anything of the sort. With that said, we've really heard nothing about the new content. So, we're not likely to hear about maybe new NPCs or new content and stuff really until January of next year. The next Intelligence Annex is going to talk about the seasons, so that's not really going to include anything to do with NPCs. This is something that I think needs to be answered as soon as possible. I'm looking forward to the expertise system. I'm looking forward to that XP bar filling up. As I said in my last video, I love that feeling. It's one of the reasons why I always jump in to the new Destiny expansions. There's controversy around the light level system in Destiny. I love it because that's just something I like doing. I like progression. And if I'm going to go in and progress as a character and fill up that XP bar, I want to do that knowing that I am actually going to feel more powerful at the end of it. Not the same as I currently do in the live game, which the second system will absolutely do. But that's it, guys. That's the end of this one. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Really appreciate it. If you haven't already subscribed and turned on notifications, then please do, and that way you'll never miss a video. I suspect the next news video will be details on the new Apparel event coming in December, so watch out for that one. Unless something big drops in the next couple of days, I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Epic out.